Hi, this is Chris Walker. Picture this. You just dropped $2 grand on a gorgeous new 4K TV and that killer Dolby Atmos soundbar everyone is talking about. You spent all weekend mounting it, hiding the cables, getting it perfect. You fire up the big action movie scene, the explosions start, and the sound is half a second behind the picture. Lip sync issues. Or worse, your expensive soundbar display just says stereo instead of Atmos. Why? Because you got caught in one of the most annoying hardware traps in the industry right now. You looked at the screen specs, the nits, the pixels, but you ignored the one boring port on the back that actually matters. Today, we are officially burying standard HDMI ARC. It's dead, and I'm going to show you why your next TV must have eARC if you care even a little bit about sound or modern gaming. Before we rip the spec sheets apart, if you appreciate independent, unsponsored testing that actually puts your wallet ahead of brand marketing, please smash that like button and subscribe. It really is the only way we can keep these reviews honest. Let's get into the why, because companies love to hide behind acronyms. Look, HDMI ARC, the audio return channel, was a miracle when it dropped in 2009. It meant one cable could send video up to the TV and sound down to the soundbar. Clean, simple, beautiful. But that tech is now nearly 17 years old. In tech years, that's a fossil. Standard ARC is limited to about 1 megabit per second of bandwidth. Think of it like a tiny one-lane country road. You can fit a compact car like a compressed 5.1 surround signal through it just fine. But today, we're trying to drive a 50-car freight train of data through that same road. I'm talking about lossless audio, uncompressed Dolby True HD, DTS HD Master Audio, and the full-fat version of Dolby Atmos you get on 4K Blu-rays. Standard ARC cannot handle that. It physically can't. So your TV has to crunch that high-quality sound down into a compressed format called Dolby Digital Plus just to squeeze it through the wire. It's like buying a 4K movie and being forced to watch it in 480p.
This is where the LG C5 OLED enters the conversation. As of January 2026, this is arguably the most balanced quote-unquote real-world TV on the market. It's the successor to the C4, and while the marketing will tell you it's all about the new Alpha 9 Gen 8 AI processor, the real win is in the plumbing. LG is one of the few brands that gives you 4 full-bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports. On most budget TVs, you get 2 fast ports and 2 slow ones, but on the C5, every single port is ready for 4K at 144 Hz. Here's the Chris Walker Insider tip though. Port number 2 is your eARC port. Now, think about the math here. If you're a gamer with a PS5 and an Xbox Series X, and you also have a high-end soundbar, you're already using 3 of those 4 ports. If you buy a TV with only 2 high-speed ports, you're literally forced to choose between playing your games at 120 Hz or having high-quality sound. You shouldn't have to make that choice in 2026. But here is where it gets weird, and this is the stuff the glossy Amazon listings won't tell you. I've been scouring the user forums and our own lab data for the C5, and there is a recurring Handshake ghost in the machine. Even with eARC, which is supposed to have mandatory lip sync correction built into the spec, we are seeing users report a 100 to 200 millisecond delay when they use certain soundbars, specifically older Sonos or Bose models that haven't had a firmware update since 2024. The TV and the soundbar are basically speaking 2 dialects of the same language. In the C5 settings, you'll see a toggle for digital sound out. If you leave it on auto, the TV tries to be smart and negotiate the best format. Often it fails. You'll get a PCM stereo signal on your soundbar even though you're watching a movie with a $50,000 sound mix. You have to manually switch that setting to pass-through. It sounds like a small thing, but for a non-techie person, that's the difference between hearing the movie the way it was intended and feeling like you wasted $1,500.
And while we're on the subject of the C5, can we talk about the OLED dimming in game mode? If you're using eARC to run a high-end gaming setup, you'll notice that in the 2026 model, LG has gotten even more aggressive with their static content Luma device. Basically, if you're playing a game with a static HUD, like a health bar or a map, the TV will slowly dim the entire screen to protect the pixels. It's great for longevity, but it can be annoying as hell during a long gaming session.
Look, I want to hear from you guys before we move into the Samsung and Sony comparisons. What's the one piece of gear in your setup that's giving you the most headaches? Is it a soundbar that won't connect? A TV that keeps dropping the signal? Drop a comment below with the model numbers. I read every single one, and it's how I decide which nightmare handshake fixes we cover in the next deep dive. So if the LG C5 is the all-rounder, why would you look anywhere else? Well, because OLED has one massive enemy, the sun. If you've got a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows, that C5, as beautiful as it is going to look like a black mirror during a Sunday afternoon football game. You'll be seeing the reflection of your own frustrated face more than the players on the field. That brings us to our next heavy hitter, which takes a completely different approach to the eARC problem and brightness, the Samsung S95F. This is the 2026 QD OLED flagship, and it is a literal light cannon. We're talking over 2100 nits of peak brightness. To put that in perspective, the LG C5 we just talked about struggles to hit 1000 nits in the same window, but Samsung does something very controversial with their audio return. They are the only major manufacturer that still refuses to support Dolby Vision on the video side, and that actually has a weird ripple effect on how they handle eARC.
See, when you have a TV that doesn't support the full Dolby ecosystem, the handshake between the TV and a Dolby Atmos soundbar can sometimes get confused. Samsung wants you to buy a Samsung soundbar. They have this feature called Q Symphony, where the TV speakers and the soundbar work together. It sounds great on paper. In reality, it can actually introduce more latency because the TV's processor has to perfectly align the internal speakers with the external ones over that eARC connection. I've tested this with the S95F and the latest Q-series soundbars, and while the wall of sound effect is impressive, I've found myself turning it off 90% of the time just to ensure the voices stayed perfectly synced with the lips. And here is the truth bomb for the Samsung owners. The S95F uses a massive amount of AI processing to clean up the image and manage that insane brightness. That processing takes time. Even though the game mode input lag is incredible, we measured it at 8.9 milliseconds, that doesn't account for the audio processing time. If you're using eARC to send a raw, uncompressed signal from your Xbox to the TV, and then the TV has to process that image and then send the audio back down to the soundbar, you might find that the audio is actually ahead of the video. Most TVs only let you add delay to the audio. They can't make the audio go faster. So if your audio is ahead of the video because the video processing is too heavy, you're stuck. This is why I always tell people, if you're buying the S95F, you better make sure your soundbar has an HDMI in port as well. Don't rely solely on eARC if you're a professional level gamer or a movie purist who notices a single frame of lag. Now, if both of these options feel like they're priced for people with private jet money, I hear you. The 55-inch premium market is getting expensive, but there is a third player that has been absolutely disrupting the USA market by offering high-end eARC specs for about half the price. We're talking about the Hisense U8QG. This is a mini LED TV, not an OLED. And for many of you, this is actually the smarter buy for 2026. Why? Because mini LED gives you that massive brightness, hitting nearly 3000 nits without the risk of permanent pixel burn-in. But, and there is always a but with Budget Kings, the eARC implementation on Hisense has historically been adventurous. On the U8QG, they've moved to a new MediaTek chipset that supports eARC on HDMI 3. Wait, did you catch that? On the LG, it was port 2. On the Hisense, it's port 3. This is the kind of stuff that drives people crazy. You spend 3 hours mounting the TV, you plug everything in, and nothing works. Why? Because you assumed the ports were the same as your old TV. On the U8QG, port 3 is only one of 2 ports that supports 4K/144Hz. So if you plug your soundbar into port 3, you've just used up 50% of your high-speed gaming ports. It's a port tax, and if you're a heavy user, it's a tax you might not want to pay. I've also noticed a very specific issue in the U8QG user reviews regarding CEC volume lag.
CEC is the technology that lets your TV remote control your soundbar's volume. When you're using eARC on a Hisense, there is often a rubber band effect. You press the volume up button on your remote, nothing happens for a second, so you press it 3 more times, and then suddenly the volume jumps from 10 to 40 and blows your eardrums out. It's a firmware issue, and Hisense is usually pretty good about patching these things, but out of the box, it's a frustration that you just don't deal with on the Sony or LG side of the fence. Look, we're just getting started. We've covered the OLED King and the brightness beast, but what if you don't care about 144 Hz? What if you just want the most cinematic, director's intent experience possible, and you want the most stable eARC connection in the world? That leads us to the brand that everyone loves to complain is overpriced, but every professional calibrator has in their own living room.
Now, if you ask any professional calibrator what TV they have in their own living room, they won't say LG and they definitely won't say Samsung. They'll say Sony. And for 2026, the Sony Bravia 7 is the one that's causing the most noise. But here's the thing. Sony doesn't win on peak brightness, and they definitely don't win on the spec sheet. If you look at the back of this TV, you're going to see something that will make most hardcore gamers want to throw their controller through the window. Only 2 of the 4 HDMI ports are actually HDMI 2.1. Just 2 in 2026. This is what I call the Sony stubbornness. And guess what? One of those 2 high-speed ports is also your eARC port. So if you're a multi-console owner who also wants a high-end soundbar, you are immediately in a cable-swapping nightmare. You have to choose. Do you want your PS5 to run at 120 Hz, or do you want your soundbar to get that uncompressed eARC signal? You can't have both without a dedicated HDMI switcher or a high-end AV receiver. I know what you're thinking. Chris, why would I ever buy this then? Because Sony's XR processing is basically magic. While other TVs are guessing where to put the light, Sony's cognitive processor XR is analyzing the focal point of the human eye in real time. It's the difference between a picture that looks digital and a picture that looks like you're looking through a window. But where Sony actually beats everyone else is eARC stability. In our lab testing, the Bravia 7 has the fastest handshake time in the industry. When you turn on your TV, your soundbar wakes up almost instantly. No audio not found errors, no 5-second delays where you're staring at a silent screen while the actors' mouths move. Sony's CEC, or Consumer Electronics Control, is the gold standard. They call it Bravia Sync, and unlike the budget brands, it actually works. And let's talk about a feature that most people ignore, Voice Zoom 3. This is a Sony exclusive tech that uses AI to identify human speech and separate it from the background noise. If you've ever watched a Christopher Nolan movie and felt like you needed a degree in linguistics just to hear the dialogue over the explosions, this is a lifesaver. And because it's processed at the TV level and sent over eARC, it works with your external soundbar too. Most TVs just send the raw audio and hope your soundbar can figure it out. Sony fixes the audio before it leaves the port.
But look, I'll be honest with you, not everyone has $2,000 to drop on a Sony. And if you're sitting there thinking, Chris, I just want a TV that works, has the fast ports, and won't cost me a kidney, then we need to talk about the TCL QM6K. TCL has been the David to the industry's Goliaths for years, but in 2026, they aren't just competing on price anymore. The QM6K is a mini LED beast that is effectively the GTR of the TV world. It's got 144 Hz support, it's got AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, and it's hitting brightness levels that make the LG C5 look dim. Here's where it gets interesting for the eARC conversation. TCL finally realized that users were tired of the port tax. On the QM6K, they've given us a dedicated eARC port that isn't tied to your primary gaming ports. This is a massive win. It means you can have your 144 Hz PC and your 120 Hz console both plugged into the high-speed ports and still have your soundbar connected via eARC without sacrificing any performance. But, and you knew there was a but, the software on these TCL units is still where the budget shows through.
They use Google TV, which I usually love, but TCL's implementation is heavy. We've seen ghost switching, where the TV will randomly decide to switch audio from the soundbar back to the internal speakers in the middle of a movie. It's that CEC volume lag I mentioned earlier. It's not a deal breaker, but it is the kind of quirk that reminds you that you paid $700 instead of $1,700. If you're the type of person who gets annoyed by small software bugs, you've been warned. But if you want the absolute best nits per dollar ratio in the USA market right now, the QM6K is the undisputed champion. Now, let's talk about the dark horse of 2026, the Amazon Omni Mini LED. Amazon used to make cheap TVs, the kind you'd buy for a guest bedroom or a college dorm. But the 2026 Omni Mini LED is a different animal. They've gone all in on the smart home ecosystem. If you have a house full of Echoes and Ring cameras, this TV is the brain of the operation.
The eARC implementation here is surprisingly robust because Amazon wants you to buy their Fire TV soundbars. They've optimized the Handshake to be almost as fast as Sony's. Plus, you get the ambient experience, which turns your TV into a $1,000 piece of art with widgets for your calendar and grocery list when you're not watching it. But here is the stuff they don't tell you in the manual. The Amazon Omni is aggressive with its data tracking. Every time you use that eARC connection to watch a movie, Amazon is logging what you're watching, how long you're watching it, and what your volume levels are. And because it's a Fire TV, the interface is basically one giant billboard. You'll spend more time scrolling past ads for The Boys Season 12 than you will actually finding your own content. And from a pure performance standpoint, the input lag on the Amazon Omni is significantly higher than the LG or the TCL. We measured it at 13.4 milliseconds in 1080p 60 Hz. For casual gaming, it's fine. For competitive Call of Duty, you're going to feel like you're playing in molasses. We're also seeing a lot of dirty screen effect, or DSE, on these Amazon panels. If you watch a lot of hockey or football, you're going to notice vertical bands of gray during fast pans across the white ice or green grass. It's a lottery. Some panels are perfect, some look like they were cleaned with a greasy rag. So where does that leave us? You've got the Sony for the purists, the TCL for the value hunters, and the Amazon for the Alexa addicts. But all of them are moving toward this eARC-only future. The reason I say HDMI ARC is dead isn't just because the specs are better on eARC. It's because the entire ecosystem is being built around it. In 2026, streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus are starting to experiment with high bitrate audio modes that simply won't trigger if the TV detects a standard ARC connection. You'll be paying for the premium subscription tier, but you'll be getting the basic sound quality. Think of it like this. Standard ARC is a 1080p video. It was great for a long time, but we've moved to 4K, and you wouldn't buy a 1080p TV today, would you? Then why are you settling for 1080p level sound?
Before we move into the final verdict and my best overall pick for 2026, I want to address the biggest lie in the soundbar industry right now. You'll see soundbars on Amazon for $199 that claim they have full eARC support. I bought 5 of them last month to test in the lab, and what I found was shocking. Most of these budget bars are eARC compatible, which is a fancy way of saying they have the port, but they don't have the internal processors to actually handle the uncompressed data. They're basically taking that 37 megabit signal, immediately crushing it back down to 1 megabit, and then playing it through cheap plastic speakers. It's a scam, plain and simple. If you're going to invest in a TV with eARC, you have to match it with a soundbar that can actually speak the language. In the next part, I'm going to break down the specific soundbar and TV pairings that actually make sense for your wallet, and I'm going to give you my definitive do not buy list for 2026. If a model is on that list, I don't care how big the discount is on Black Friday, you stay away. Ready? Let's keep moving. Look, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I know your head is probably spinning with nits, refresh rates, and port numbers, but this is the moment where we stop talking about specs and start talking about your actual living room. Because at the end of the day, a TV isn't a museum piece, it's a tool for your entertainment. And if that tool doesn't play nice with your soundbar or your console, it's a broken tool. When we group these based on who is this for, the picture becomes very clear. If you are the gaming pro, someone who owns a PS
PS5, an Xbox Series X, and maybe a high-end PC, your search starts and ends with the LG C5 OLED. I don't say that lightly. While the Samsung is brighter and the TCL is cheaper, LG is still only the company that treats every HDMI port like a first-class citizen. You get the 144 Hz, you get the G-Sync, and most importantly, you get an eARC port that doesn't force you to sacrifice a high-speed gaming slot. It is the most frictionless experience in the 2026 market.
Now, if you are the bright living room king, if your TV is competing with huge windows or a bright kitchen, you need to look at the Samsung S95F. Yes, I gave it a hard time earlier about the processing lag and the lack of Dolby Vision, but you cannot argue with 2100 nits. It is effectively sunproof. Just remember my warning. If you buy the S95F, do not rely on a cheap eARC soundbar. Pair it with a high-end bar that has its own HDMI inputs to bypass that processing sync issue. Then there's the movie purist. This is for the person who has a 4K Blu-ray collection and actually knows what 24 frames per second means. For you, the Sony Bravia 7 is the only logical choice. Even with the annoying port tax and only 2 HDMI 2.1 slots, Sony's motion handling and eARC stability are in a league of their own. When you watch a movie on a Sony, it doesn't look like a TV show, it looks like cinema. The way it handles dialogue through that eARC connection is, quite frankly, what every other brand should be aiming for. But I know what most of you are really waiting for, the best overall value, the TV that gives you 90% of the flagship performance for 50% of the price. In 2026, the best value TV is the TCL QM6K. I was skeptical, I really was. I thought the move to the 144 Hz panel would drive the price up too much, but TCL somehow kept it under $800 for the 55-inch model. By giving us that dedicated eARC port, they solved the biggest headache of the budget category. You can actually build a full, high-end home theater around this TV without feeling like you're constantly compromising. It's bright, it's fast, and while the software has its quirks, it is a hardware powerhouse that should cost twice as much as it does. Look, here's the truth bomb I promised you at the start. The TV industry is currently in a state of planned obsolescence that they don't want to talk about. By keeping standard ARC alive in their entry-level models, brands are basically ensuring that your sound system will feel broken in 3 years. They want you to feel that frustration so you'll upgrade again. But you don't have to play that game. When you go to buy your next TV, whether it's the LG, the Sony, or the TCL, I want you to ignore the 8K upscaling stickers. Ignore the AI Picture Pro marketing fluff. Look at the back of the box or the spec sheet on Amazon. If it doesn't say eARC, you walk away. If you're buying a soundbar and it only lists ARC, you put it back on the shelf. You are paying for high-definition content. You are paying for Netflix Premium. You are paying for the latest consoles. Don't let a $5 internal chip be the reason you aren't actually hearing what you paid for. I've done the legwork for you. Down in the description, I've put together a safe path list. These are direct links to the exact models we tested today, vetted for eARC stability, Handshake reliability, and real-world performance. These aren't just the highest rated on Amazon, these are the ones that actually passed our Handshake stress test in the lab. Using those links supports this channel and allows us to keep buying these TVs ourselves, so we never have to take a cent from the brands. Don't let the marketing guys win. Buy the tech that actually respects your ears. I'm Chris Walker, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.